Hi, together we will visit the memorial site of the SS shooting range in Hebertshausen. We made a one-take film showing a tour through the memorial site. You will get an impression of how the site looks today and a little overview of the history of the shooting range. Due to the lack of historical pictures and copyright issues, we decided not to show any other material. Between 1937 and 1938, a shooting range where SS soldiers underwent military training was built in Hebertshausen near the concentration camp of Dachau. Between 1941 and 1942, 4,000 Soviet prisoners of war were murdered here. The legal basis for these shootings was the so-called Kommissarbefehl, in English, Commissar Order, issued in 1941 by the High Command of the German Armed Forces. The Commissar Order was a violation of the international law on the treatment of prisoners of war, because it decreed that so-called political commissars were to be shot immediately upon capture. So which persons were meant to be murdered by this order? According to the order, all communist functionaries, styrers and agitators, leading personalities from the economic sector, intellectuals and all Jews. On one hand, the objective was to weaken any resistance. On the other hand, we have to bear in mind that the German Reich was about to launch a war of extermination against the Soviet Union, as well as an ideological war against communism. While the Nazis saw themselves as the Herrenrasse, the supreme of all races, they not only saw Jews and Sinti and Roma as their racial enemies, but also the Slavic people. The Nazi idea of Lebensraum im Osten, or the expansion of German territory into Poland and the Soviet Union, was to be accomplished with a war against these people. To sum up, the National Socialists believed in racial, ideological and economic reasons to fight against the Soviet Union. These beliefs gave the necessary context for the creation of the Kommissarbefehl, the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht, or the Wehrmacht High Command, dehumanized the Germans' enemy, and that's why they had no problem violating the existing law on the treatment of prisoners of war, the Geneva Conventions. In the view of the Wehrmacht High Command, quotation, "The fight against National Socialism is ingrained into the Bolshevist soldier's spirit and blood. He uses every possible method to lead his fight: sabotage, propaganda, arson, murder. Therefore, the Bolshevist soldier was forfeit any expectation of being treated as an honorable soldier in accordance with the Geneva Convention." This is the ideological background of the Kommissarbefehl. According to estimates, over 40,000 Soviet prisoners of war fall victim to this order. In the Dachau concentration camp, over 4,000 Soviet prisoners were murdered. In August 1941, the first executions took place in the bunker yard. Later, the prisoners were brought to the already existing shooting range at Hebertshausen. The SS tried to conceal the shootings, but the prisoners in the concentration camp knew what was going on. For example, the prisoners working in the laundry store had to wash and store the clothing of the executed. By counting the pieces of clothing, they were able to estimate roughly how many prisoners were executed. Located on the shooting range are 5 long lanes for training firearms, and to the southwest 2 short pistol shooting stands. The 5 long lanes are connected with one another through a protected walkway at the northern end. 50 to 120 prisoners were transported to the shooting range by lorry. After the arrival, they were forced to undress and line up in rows of 5 in the eastern shooting lane. SS men would stand on the walls to prevent the prisoners from escaping. They were herded in groups of 5, handcuffed to wooden stakes and shot at the western shooting lane. The remaining prisoners had to wait behind the eastern shooting lane until it was their turn. They had to be present while their comrades were shot. After the war, US troops used the shooting range for their own training purposes. The former maintenance building was renovated and used as a place for displaced persons from former German regions in the east. Later, and even until today, the building is owned by the city of Dachau and to house people who are unemployed. It was not until 1964, almost 20 years after the liberation, that a monument to commemorate the 4,000 people that were shot here was built. Similar to other places of Nazi violence, it took some years to establish memorial sites. In general, the early remembrance was mostly organized by survivors. For example, it was due to the effort of survivors that the buildings of the former concentration camp in Dachau were not pulled down by the city of Dachau. But there were almost no survivors from the shootings in Hebertshausen, and further initiatives to create a place of remembrance were rejected. The monument erected in 1964 mentioned the murder of the prisoners of war, but their nationality was not mentioned. During the Cold War, there was almost no remembrance for the Soviet victims in West Germany. It took another 20 years until local organizations worked for a more meaningful remembrance in the 1980s. It was then that participants of the International Youth Meeting in Dachau did maintenance work at the site. Since 1991, every year on the 29th of April, a celebration commemorating the liberation at the shooting range memorial site is held. Due to the nature of this memorial, the celebration has a more political character. In 2014, the site was transformed into a memorial with an outdoor exhibition.